Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stress-Free IEP, the show where we help families build their village to raise their neurodivergent children with confidence and support. I'm your host, Frances Schefter, special education attorney, advocate, and fellow parent walking this journey with you. Each week, we shine a light on professionals, resources, and real-world strategies that can empower you to navigate the IEP process and beyond. Whether you're turning in live on Facebook or YouTube or listening later on your favorite podcast app, we're so glad you're here. Please feel free to ask questions live or in the comment section. We promise to respond. Let's dive in now and meet today's amazing guests. Today, I'm introducing Roger Haney and his wife, Erin. They are parents to two children, Caitlin, who's 16 and neurotypical, and Jake, 15, who is autistic and was identified early in life. After experiencing gaps in services while living in Florida, they relocated to Pittsburgh, where Jake thrived in a supportive school. Still, concerns about his future, especially employment, pushed them to take a bold step. Roger left his corporate career. They invested their retirement savings, and together they founded Spectrum Fudge, a business built to employ individuals with varying abilities. Welcome to the show, Erin and Roger.
Thank you so much.
We're so glad to have you here. And so, let's start at the beginning. Jake was diagnosed relatively early, which doesn't always happen. And what was that like for you guys?
It was one of those things where our daughter is 13 months older than Jake. So we were just experiencing all of her milestones as Jake was born. And it was very fresh in our mind. Well, Caitlin rolled over at 6 months. Caitlin did this at 8 months. Caitlin did this. And so when Jake was growing, we were like, oh, he's about 6 weeks behind Caitlin in doing this. Okay, well, he's a boy, what everybody hears. And then little things came. Caitlin walked at 12 months. He walked at 14. We're like, it's just different. Just they're built different. And then we noticed that he gave us less eye contact than she did. He pointed to things less, and again, we had those moms, our moms both said, oh, he's a boy. He's the second born. It's okay. That typical stuff. And then, I would say things to Roger around 16 or 17 months. And I'm like, are we missing something? And he's like, I don't know. I think we're overreacting. And then he'd see something and he's like, are we missing? I'm like, no, I think we're overreacting. So we talk each other out of it. And then I went out of town for a weekend when he was 20 months old. And Roger said, hey, I think you're right. I'm like, oh, okay. So he saw it. Yep. And then we made an appointment with our pediatrician. The pediatrician did simple tests at his office. At this point, Jake was 20 months and he was walking and standing and he put like a bag of Cheerios up on a top shelf. And Jake didn't look at us and point. Jake just went for it himself. And he's like, that's a communication delay. He would typically at this age look at you, point, nothing like that. He wasn't speaking. He wasn't saying first words. So those were the triggers. But I would say within 6 weeks of us meeting with the PCP, or 3 weeks within meeting with the pediatrician, we immediately got to talk to an early interventionist. And they immediately got him scheduled. And like a month before he turned 2, he was in speech classes in our home.
Yeah, and I would say by the time he was 5, he was in school, for
3
long periods of time. Excuse me, 3. You're right. Much earlier than most other, obviously, kids his age. And, that was hard, too. But we knew that if he was going to, be the best Jake he could be, he would need to be one of his teacher called sabotage, right? We want to sabotage and bring him out of his world and into our world as much as we can. So that's when the journey kind of began. And thanks to early intervention and some of his great teachers that he had along the way, Jake was able to get a lot of help that I think has got him on where he has started the building blocks for where he is today.
Yeah, and he was formally diagnosed in the state of Florida at 5. So he had services. He was initially diagnosed as expressive and
receptive.
Receptive communication delays. And then at 5, they gave him the official label once he was officially a kindergartner. because they said, in the state of Florida, he needed that label. Again, each state has a different jurisdiction of how they handle diagnoses. We didn't see, for Jake, we had a developmental pediatrician, but we also had to see a neurologist for his diagnosis. Again, different than what you see up here in Pennsylvania. So the states run those things differently.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the same thing with IEPs. IEPs are technically federal, but every state is slightly different. And it's like, even counties are slightly different. It's like, we're right next door, but no, totally different.
Yeah. And that was the thing too. They had an IEP when he was 3 years old that we followed. But again, by the time he hit kindergarten, that's when the IEP became quote unquote official. And that's why we had to have the diagnosis.
Got it. Yeah. And then how long did you stay in Florida, and what made you decide to go up to Pennsylvania?
I mean, we left, he was 7. He was 7 and we were paying close to $25,000 out of pocket a year for therapies that they didn't cover in insurance. And we were maxing out credit cards and doing what we could just to get him therapies so he could catch up. Not even putting him ahead, just catching up. And, and at the time we didn't realize our daughter was neurotypically falling behind in the school system compared to the education in Pennsylvania. And Roger's from he's from the Pittsburgh area. And we just started talking to people. And, I made a joke because I literally found a house that I liked north of the city. I was like, oh, this looks fun. We should move. And he goes, because there's a pretty house. And then I was like, no, serious conversation. And it was Easter weekend of 17. And I said, your parents are going to church with your sister and her kids. This sucks. We should be there. Why are we missing all of this? And then it became concentrating more on the education and then saying, wait, look at all this that we can get. And I had a friend that said, Erin, the state will cover Jake's therapies. He'll get more in school. He was designated to get an hour a week of speech in Florida, but he was only getting one 20-minute session, sometimes 2, because they didn't have the infrastructure. And they would catch up and then they'd say, well, we put him in a group because we couldn't fit a one-on-one time. So, and it's like, he's not going to get what he needs in a group.
Right.
So that was really
and it was really his teachers that we had who we felt very, very highly and still do today. And they're very much into Jake's life and watching his growth and development. And, they're the ones that came to us and said, hey, if you really want the best for Jake,
get out.
You need to look at moving. I mean, they said Florida is about 20 years behind that of many northern states. And then that's when we kind of started to open up what that looked like, where those areas could be. And then we ultimately landed, as Erin said, back in Pittsburgh, which is where my family's from. So, and of course, her parents lived a mile away from us in Florida. And they said, well, if you're taking the grandkids, we're coming with you. So it was, it was awesome.
That's great.
So all 6 of us moved up at the same time. And then we settled about a mile from each other. So from our kids' perspective, it was kind of like their normal life in Florida because her parents were very involved with their lives, before and especially after school care. So that really helped out a lot.
Yeah, it didn't change for our kids. And I think the consistency was important.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's nice. I mean, having family support, it's all parents. It's such a difference. Such a difference.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're lucky your parents went also. So then you had everybody together. That's awesome.
It was huge. And we have cousins, the kids have cousins their age. And Jake now had peer models other than his sister. Made a huge difference.
Yeah.
And it's his best friends today. Of course, his sister is, but he loves to get together with his cousins. So it's good for him, and it gets him out of his little world that he can be in sometimes and gets him to participate and play with him. So it's awesome.
That is awesome. That is so great. And so you moved up to Pennsylvania and the schools are better and he's doing well, but then what happens after school?
It still wasn't enough, to be honest. I was in healthcare for 20 years in Florida, and we were at this point back in Pennsylvania now for 4 years. And I was traveling quite a bit for work. And that was fine, even though I felt like I was missing a lot at home. He was on the right path in school, and that's what was important. But we still worried a lot about what his future might be like from an employment standpoint. So I know I drove Aaron crazy and my parents and anybody else who would listen, but going around the time of COVID, I thought there's got to be some different way. So whether it was an ice cream shop, a coffee shop, a car wash, like I was thinking, what could he do when he was older and I can have an opportunity, a place for him to go, a safe environment for him and others like him. So just through the power of networking and getting to know the people, and we got pretty heavy into the special needs community in Pittsburgh. In that 4 years that we were there, Aaron did a lot with Autism Speaks and several other organizations. We met people, and one name, from one conversation to another, I ended up meeting a individual and his wife that were looking to retire and sell their fudge company. And it's like, fudge, I don't know, that's different. So I can't take credit that I have some great 100-year-old family recipe. It was just a matter of watching what him and his wife did. And I noticed that the behaviors are rather repetitive. And I thought, this could lend well for individuals like Jake and others. So they were looking, they had a very small operation, but it was a perfect place for us to kind of start our factory. And now fast forward 4.5 years, Spectrum Fudge has kind of evolved a couple times. We've changed owners a couple times, added a new partner and his wife a little over a year ago, which is really helping us spring forward. And I think one of the best things that Aaron and I did is, we have the name Spectrum Fudge, and, with those that are around the autism environment, they know that's, autism spectrum. And that's how it started. And that's what the plan was. But I felt like we want to be a very inclusive workforce. And I felt rather exclusive at times because there were so many other kids that need an opportunity that maybe don't have the label of autism. Mm-hmm. So we came up with the idea, and I think early 2023, about changing it to what we call the Spectrum of Abilities. And we open that up now. We have the School of the Deaf, the School of the Blind. We have the Children's Institute of Pittsburgh, and about 10 different other local high schools that come to the factory and bring individuals in of all varying abilities and giving them the opportunity to have, in many cases, their very first chance of work. What is work like? For many of us, I know myself, I worked in restaurants from the age of 16 on. Aaron was in the grocery stores as a high school kid, but many of us were fortunate enough to be given those opportunities. But unfortunately, many of these individuals aren't given that same chance. So we kind of like to be known for that in the community, that we're giving individuals their first experience with work.
Well, and here's the, and I'm just going to piggyback on what Roger said. Because we work with the schools, we've had individuals, our son included, where they have built these work skills into their IEPs. So to bring it back to what you do, Francis, I think that's been our big focus with our son at all of his IEP meetings. We've said he needs to learn recipes. He needs to learn how to read recipes. He needs to learn how to read instructions. He needs to understand how to move things from one place to another in a workplace. And thankfully, the school district we attend, and a lot of them do, they have a coffee shop that the special needs individuals work at during the day. So he's learning how to put cookies in the oven. He's learning how to watch a timer to take cookies out when it buzzes. He's learning not to eat the cookies on his shift, right? But again, we've said, please build this into his IEP. He's going to start going to our factory next year as a sophomore. He's a freshman this year. So he's going to start going to that factory with his school and learning things. And again, we're like, this needs to be built into his IEP because this also is dependent on his graduation, the goals he needs. It will help him when we're applying for that waiver, when he graduates and said, look what he's accomplished in his IEP to meet graduation requirements and then be able to get his waiver. at whatever age we decide he's exiting the school system. So that's been enlightening and eye-opening, is knowing that, yes, most people go to high school and have their English requirements, math requirements, social studies requirements. Jake has his English and math requirements, but he also has his work experience requirements and his life skills requirements. So for them to build that into the IEP has been life-changing. And also, as a side note, one of the other motivations for us leaving Florida was, in Florida, he would not have gotten a high school diploma. He would have received a Sunshine Standards certificate.
Attendance, yeah.
And that is vastly different than what the state of Pennsylvania offers. And we wanted our kid to have a diploma.
Yeah. It's so interesting because every state is different with that also. Because I taught in Florida before going to law school, and you either had the high school diploma or you had your certificate of attendance. And Maryland is also, you either have your high school diploma or your alternative learning standards.
I know that sounds silly, but I wanted my child. We wanted both of our children to have a high school diploma.
Yeah,
right.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I love that you built it into the IEP in the transition, because that's one of the things, like more recently even, is that it's that part of the IEP is so neglected usually. And it's, I can't tell you how many times I've gone and read IEPs and like the transition section is, we'll look at vocational schools, we'll look at colleges. And I'm like, okay, that's not individualized. That's not what this is about. It's really, truly, let's sit down and see what we want for the future. And I just want to mention that there was, because I know we'll find it and put the link in, but I had somebody on the show that was similar situation of the transition stuff was neglected. Like what happens after? And so she talks about how important the law is at 14 is when they're supposed to start including this stuff. And it's not just standard framework. It's let's really look at realistically, who is this child? What can this child accomplish? Where do we want this child to be after high school? And what are the skills necessary to get there? And that's where we need to focus the education.
Absolutely. And I think, and Roger can speak to this too, watching each individual that comes into our factory is proof again that you meet one person with autism or special needs, you met one person with autism and special needs, right? They're all varying different. You look at the people that Roger works with and that Scott, our partner, works with in the factory during production, and it's, some may have dexterity issues. So some may not be doing the opening the plastic because it's hard. So they may be putting the sticker on because it's a little easier in their functionality. One may be sorting boxes because they can do that better than the fine motor skills, right? So, and then Roger has individuals with him when they're selling chocolate out in the community that can speak to people and have that ability, while others may be nonverbal working in the factory. So how do we, and one thing, and Roger, I'll let you speak to it, but one of the things that you've created now is a succession plan for individuals in the factory because the work skills are so different.
Yeah, absolutely, Aaron. And that's how it starts at the factory. We have those individuals that come in on the very first day, and it's for many of them, they're excited, they're scared, or overwhelmed. One of the biggest things I think too, other than their maybe their physical attributes and where their skills might lie, for many of us, we don't think about it, but even if we think way back to our very first job, it's about building stamina. For many of these individuals, their school might be there for 1 hour, like only 1 hour, but after 10 minutes, they're shot, and that's okay. Maybe next time it'll be 15 minutes and then 20 minutes and so on and so forth. We have individuals that do well in groups. We have individuals that need to be isolated in one-on-ones. And, we have one individual who I think very highly of, and she's come a long way. And in fact, Aaron met her mom at one of our shows. She is so grateful for the opportunity we have because she can be disruptive at times, loud, and not violent towards others, but maybe even herself or her aides. But
it's overwhelming.
it's
Yeah.
overwhelming for her. But it's like, was that Sinatra that said, if you can't make it here, we can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Well, I like to look at it saying, if you can't make it here, they're not going to make it anywhere. So I put the flip side to that, and I say, you know what, let's give them that opportunity, no matter how difficult it is on us. Safety first, but we know that going in, so we put the individuals in an area where she's not going to hurt herself or others. So. And then that succession planning, it starts off with simply coming in, and maybe the first 1, 2, 3 weeks or more, it's simply packaging the products, learning how to put on that glove and putting like the chocolate covered Oreo into a bag, and then putting them in 2, 3 into one bag, make sure they're all facing the same direction. Then they pass it down to their partner, and they use a heat sealer, and they close it up, and then they pass it down to their partner. And maybe it's going to a customer in a store, so we put the nutrition label on the back, so somebody has to learn how to put the stickers on and make sure they're all facing the right direction. And it's those type of tasks. And then as they grow, we make like seasoned pretzels, so they learn how to make the pretzels. They put in the ingredients, and they learn to stir it. And then from there, they get involved with the fudge making, or they'll come and do shows with me out in the community. So it's definitely that succession planning and growth that we try to strive for at Spectrum Fudge.
And some need verbal cues, some need visual cues, right? So
absolutely. We had this. Go ahead, Aaron. No, please go ahead.
No, but we work with those with vision impairments, right? Mm-hmm. So vision impairments, we have to, working certain shows, we'll use large, bright yellow neon Post-it notes with a black Sharpie and write the prices, because that's what they can see. Or we have a magnifying overlay for the point of sale system, because they need that, right? But we need it to be removable, because there's people that don't need that. Right. So because of that, we are able to pivot, and it's been important, because those aren't techniques that are widely used in the workplace in a generality. So that's what makes us unique.
Yeah. Even though technically, legally they should be, but ADA, but they don't, but there's an extent. And there's a difference between a company providing the accommodations under ADA and a company built to, this is who we are. We're expecting combinations. And it's just that understanding. And I can see how the kids, young adults, are just feeling like they belong. They don't feel different from everybody else. It's like we all have something different that we're working on.
And because Roger and I are parents, seeing the parents become emotionally moved by it is so touching to us, because we know what that feels like. And we can't wait till we see Jake being able to work in that capacity. He does little things around, but he's still not fully encompassed into the day-to-day. So being able to see, when we see those individuals get their first paycheck, are you kidding me? Like, it's the most beautiful sight. And the fact that they've put in the work and they're treated as others is amazing.
Yeah. And so how does it work? So they come from, are they getting paychecks when they're coming with the high school, or no? That's like the work training stuff for the high school.
It's a combination of a couple of different ways. So we do have volunteer programs through high schools. Usually they're individuals between their freshman and junior year where they're volunteering. Maybe the school comes every week or every other week, and maybe they come for 1 hour. That's solely volunteer. We also have partnerships with OVR, where there are paid work opportunities and work experiences that are through the state, where we have OVR providers coming into our factory. So the OVR providers compensated, as well as the individual. And that comes from a bucket of money that comes from the state, which ultimately comes from the federal government. And then there are also a bucket of individuals that are regular employees on our payroll. So it's kind of a combination of the three. For many of the high school kids, their dream isn't necessarily to work in a chocolate shop, and that's great. And quite honestly, for most individuals, we don't want them to stay there. Our goal is to kind of think of us like the farm clubs, right? We want to give them those skills that they need, not how to pack the perfect bag of pretzels, but how to be punctual, to be dependable, to be a good teammate, co-worker, those soft skills that are, if not equally as important, more important than the regular skills that a job might have. But we have individuals, one wanted to be an electrician. But he came from high school, volunteered. We put him through an OVR program where if you come in through an OVR program, we expect a little bit more out of you, and dependability and work and commitment and stamina. And can you work 4 hours without a 15-minute break? Maintaining all the appropriate laws. And as a former HR person, I understand that, those laws, but we try to prepare you for the real world. So we have an individual now who's graduating from electrical school this summer. We have another individual whose dream was to drive a forklift. That was it. He knew from the very first time that's what he wanted. Like, his mind was made up. So we prepared him for that. We don't have a forklift in our factory because we're not that big yet, but we prepared him for a lot of stuff in warehouse. And
we had a pallet jack. He got to run the pallet jack.
Great first step for him. But so it's those kind of things as well. So it's a combination of some individuals are compensated, but for the first round of individuals, those high school volunteers, it is truly a volunteer program.
Yeah. But I love that because it is so important that you don't, that parents don't think about, it's overwhelming. We all know that, I have 2 neurodiverse kids too. And it's like, you get this diagnosis and like, now what, where do we go from here? And, which is why this show came about, is like, hey, build your village. Look what options you have.
And, the village has been what saved us, to your point. When you said that in the introduction, oh my word, we got involved in organizations early on when we moved up here to meet people. We are not part of all those organizations anymore because we've built our team and moved on, and we've taken certain players with us, and certain players were only part of, a season. Right. But I would say, we always joke even now that, Jake's 3-year-old pre-K teachers were the original head coaches of our team. Right? Roger and I are the general managers, but we've got those head coaches, those offensive coordinators, whatever you want to call them, and they still sit there. I'll never forget his first teacher when he was 3 years old. They took Jake to, their son was getting music lessons. So they said, hey, bring your son to our son's music lessons and we'll teach him how to read. And they were both saying that. And I was like, you guys are crazy. Like, focus on your son. And they're like, no, we know Jake can read. Let's do it. So he's 5 years old in, kindergarten at this point, but his teachers that he had when he was 3, they were like, we want to teach. So they're sitting with him at their son's music lesson. He's in his music lesson, and they're with my kid, with Roger, my kid, and they're like going through books with our son, and our son learned sight words because of them. They weren't even on duty. They weren't even his teachers, but they're, it's because to feel this passion, you have to truly love what you do and want to be a difference for these kids. And those are the people that need to be a part of your village, because you'll be able to take them with you.
Exactly. And I love that you say, or, could be for a season or a lifetime. It depends, and it doesn't always have to be for a lifetime. It's just, this is what's needed now, and move on. I love this. I wish I was closer. But it's so great that, you guys leaned into it. You found a need and you leaned into the lead, and you took that leap of faith, and I'm such a strong believer of, like, the universe gives you what you need when you need it, like, just put it out there. Right. And
we rely pretty heavily on that. We kind of jump without looking sometimes and just keep hoping that somebody in the universe catches us. Right. And that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah. And it's just trusting that, and trusting the village, and, doing right. And I know down in Montgomery County, we have Sunflower Bakery. I don't know if you've heard about that, but Sunflower Bakery is similar, like, type setting. I know it sounds like you guys might be a little bit bigger and more well known.
I think we drove by Sunflower one time and they were closed because we were out in the Montgomery County area for something, and they were closed.
Yeah, so they're kosher. So I know they close early on Fridays and they're closed on Saturdays. Because to be kosher,
I believe it was a Saturday we were there and they were closed.
Yeah. That's why. Yeah. So, but it's like, I wish there was more, like this, because I think about, like, I taught in Florida when I was teaching, and I think about, like, gosh, so many of my kids, if they had this type of environment and this type of opportunity, because it is true, like when you get out in the workforce, like how do you be a worker? Like those soft skills, like how do
Absolutely.
you, like, what happens if you don't show up on time, and what happens, most jobs you're going to get fired. That's it. Where I'm
That's right.
assuming you have a, like, okay, well, you're late. This is what, and it's a teaching experience, and it's a learning experience.
It is, absolutely, and they learn from it. We try to think about them from a big picture standpoint. And one of the things that I learned a lot from our business partner, who helps with the day-to-day operation. Well, he immediately came on board and fell in love with the kids, and him and his wife don't have children of their own, but just absolutely is fascinated by what the capabilities of these individuals are, that he expects exactly the same out of them as he would you or I. And at first, as a parent, I was like, whoa, hey, hang on a second. But I realized that a lot of these kids are just needed to be given an opportunity. And if you pull that out of them, boy, they can shine. And that's where I think the takeaway is. And as they start off with high school and they volunteer, it's a slow climb, it's a slow build. But by the time they come on, like our one employee who's been with Aaron and I since the beginning, he has now blossomed to become our lead. He can do cooks by himself. He can run an entire shift without myself or without Scott present at the factory. It didn't happen overnight. He's coming up on his 4th year now, but he sees the capability in each and every individual. And a lot of times the biggest barrier for these individuals are us, the parents.
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly what I was going to say, Roger.
Because
and how many times does your kid want to do things better when he's not doing it for you, but when he's doing it for somebody else?
Yep.
Yeah, I see that too. Yeah, and they just, it's, I don't want to say we sell our kids short because it's hard, but it's like, as a parent, it's hard. Like, right, we protect them. We don't want them to, I'm just thinking about, like, my youngest, the pool opened on her birthday and she wanted to take the swim test. And I'm like, how would that ruin her birthday? Like, how could I let her do it? But I let her do it because she wanted to, and she passed.
Yeah.
It was the first day of the season. She hadn't been swimming in a year. I didn't think she was going to pass, but she did.
So, Francis, we do that to our neurotypical daughter. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So, there's really no difference. And it's funny because we've said when Jake starts coming to the factory, Roger has said he doesn't want to be there initially. Right. He wants Jake to go and know that it's not playtime because, Jake's been used to growing up in the factory since he was 11, where he wouldn't work early on. We'd give him coloring or things to do so we could focus on work because we had to pump things out because it was only the two of us. But now as our operation's grown, we don't want him to go in thinking, oh, it's still playtime here. Like he now needs to shift. So if we're not there, we know Scott and the team will push him and he'll want to. We've even asked him, who do you want to work with, Dad or Scott? And he'd be like, Scott, so
right. Yeah, exactly, because it's as parents, it's a different relationship, and they know.
That's right.
They know we're going to love them no matter what.
That's right, and we are designed to be their first teacher, not their only teacher, which is why they need to find the community.
Yeah, which is so true. God, I love your story. It's so amazing because it just gives hope. Like, I'm just thinking about all of our listeners out there, and like, what would you say, like, to listeners out there, like, oh wow, like, what should we do? How can we help so that we know our child will be okay? What would you
look past the diagnosis? Don't let the diagnosis give you what I like to call analysis paralysis. Don't let that happen. I think that's so easy to do. You got to look at it as a tiny step. There's people that are just starting out on their journey. Even if their child's 3 or 13 or 23, right? You're just starting out with a diagnosis, and it's okay to start small. It's okay to, but if you're facing this transition time where you're thinking, I don't know what to do with my child when school's over and I work full time. What do I do? Well, guess what? There are resources depending on where you live. Actually anywhere, but depending on where you live, the resources may be bigger or smaller. The first thing to do is take a breath and the first people we reached out to was Autism Speaks. Why? Because it was on my television. It's the only thing I heard of. And so it was the first thing I reached out to, right? Because it's those advertisements. But guess what? You open that, people will open you up to other options and other opportunities and other opportunities. You just got to keep turning over every rock as you go along.
That's right.
And I love that you say that, because the diagnosis doesn't define our children, and that's the same with the
doesn't define you either. It's
right,
not your fault.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
It's not your fault as a parent.
Yeah.
We didn't do something wrong to get this, and we didn't do something right because we can handle it. It's the way it was. And now we are now tasked with, just as you will be tasked with your own things that come your way, is, okay, what do we do next? And you use your own logic and mindset and move forward.
And the other thing I would say is start early. Things take a long time. Paperwork is slow, whether it's applying for OVR or the waiver program, or
what's OVR? So you keep using OVR.
Occupation Vocational Rehabilitation Program.
Okay.
And
so they call it like DDA, and
exactly. Each state again probably calls it something a little bit different. But yeah, apply for those resources. And the most pivotal time I believe in these individuals' lives, same as probably us, right, is those formative years in high school. And then immediately when you get out of high school, where do you go? What do you do? And it's curbing that, what they call, right, from the classroom to the couch, and getting from the classroom straight into a path, whatever that path may be, but that path. And a lot of times those resources might not be open because they're on waiting lists, and then a month turns to 6, and then 6 turns to a year. So start early. That would be my other piece of advice.
And even as you're waiting for those waivers or whatever it is to get the resources, and you have to wait that 6 months to a year, find other ways to keep your individual involved.
Yes.
Whether it's library, get about in the community, however you can.
Yeah. No, I love that. And when the IEP, push the schools, hold the schools accountable.
Absolutely. I mean, we got a note the other day that Jake's going to have an OVR session. Occupational Voc Rehab is coming to speak to those kids this month in the school to get them ready for it. And again, it's resources.
Yeah. And it's pushing for it, because a lot of times they're willing to do it, but nobody's asked them to.
Nobody's asking. Yeah. It's almost like scholarships for your children, right? You don't know what's out there.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many scholarships that go untouched because people don't know when they're not even applying for it.
And there's federal money that goes untouched because people don't know what they're capable or what's available to them with their special needs individual.
Yeah. On every different level. Exactly.
Yeah.
So how can people get in touch with you?
So spectrumfudge.com is our platform for everything. So just because you live out of the area, we ship in all 50 states. We've hit every one of them now. We do nationwide online fundraising, where 40% of the profits go back to any organization. So whether it's a unified bocce programs, which are becoming more and more popular, or unified track, or high school marching bands, hockey teams, it doesn't matter, Boy Scouts, we do all kind of fundraising.
All of it. Yeah.
And the other thing too, for those organizations that have companies and clients, we do nationwide corporate and client gifts. So, there are different ways that you can participate and get the word out and let people know about what we do. While we may not be local, there's still ways that you can help participate with Spectrum Fudge.
Yeah. And then we have to get you guys thinking about franchising.
Yeah.
Right.
We're open to discuss. Yes.
Yeah.
That is open to discussion for nationwide or whatever comes our way.
Yeah. Because it sounds like such a great business model, and you guys have it down pat, and it's needed everywhere, as we know. So this has been so awesome. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy days to come
Thank you for
speak
having
with
us.
and share. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Stress Free IEP. We hope today's conversation gave you new tools, insights, or just a little more peace of mind as you support your neurodivergent child. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone in your village. Next week, we'll have episode 130, where Debbie Rosen and Lindsay Thomas will talk about why smart kids get stuck and how to unstick them. You can always learn more and connect with me at schefterlaw.com or follow along on social media. Until next time, remember, you do not have to do it all alone.